Welcome to Tech for Java. In this video, we are going to discuss about Java 8 features. Java 8 features are basically very important for the interview point of view. Either you are having an experience of or a freshers having an experience learner or a fresher. In all the interviews, basically Java 8 related questions are there. And interviewer is normally asking about some Java 8 feature hand-on. So before going to jump into the hands-on, we are just discussing about what all Java 8 features are important, and in Java 8 basically what all new features being introduced, which is basically important, and how it is working. So let's just start. So these are the features which are basically introduced in Java 8. These are the important features. Basically there is a functional interfaces, then there is a Lambda expression, and there is a method in references, then there is a default method in interfaces, then there is a static method in interfaces, stream API, and optional classes, then new datetime API is also introduced, and there is a Base64 API is also introduced into Java 8 features. Apart from these features, there are some changes introduced in the internal working of hash map, and there is a memory management related changes are also introduced, which we are not covering in this video, as this video becomes very huge in the length. So we will cover these things in next part of the video. So as we all know that Java 8, the most important Java 8 feature being introduced is the functional programming. So in Java 8, basically they have introduced a functional programming with the use of functional interfaces. So what is a functional interface? The functional interfaces are those interfaces which have only one abstract method to implement. Those interfaces basically defined with @functional interface, or if you are not defining @functional interface, then there would be a definition that in that particular function, that particular interface, there should only be a one abstract method to implement. So those kind of interfaces we can mark as functional interfaces. And before Java 8 feature, basically when we are defining any abstract method into an interface, we all have to define their implementing classes, and in their implementing classes we have to implement the method, abstract method, and give the body of that whatever the functionality we wanted to perform in that particular method. By Java 8, there is a leverage of providing a Lambda expression. A Lambda expression is basically used to implement the functional interfaces abstract method. So Lambda expression is basically providing an inline functionality where we are implementing an abstract method within its method itself, or wherever we are trying to call that particular interface abstract method. So basically to make over the functional interface, I have already discussed that there is a @functional interface annotation, and we can define interfaces only one abstract method and annotate that interface with @functional interfaces, and Java 8 will consider that interface as a functional interface. In Java 8, basically there are many inbuilt functional interfaces also introduced, like predicate, binary operator functions, as and so on. So these are the functional interfaces basic definition. Now we are introducing the Lambda expressions. So the Lambda expressions are basically used to implement the functional programming. So basically whenever we are using a lambda expression is used to provide basically the body of the functional interface abstract method. So this is basically used to implement the abstract method of functional interfaces, and lambda expression basically providing an inline implementation. So wherever suppose we have defined one functional interface and there is a one abstract method. So to implement that abstract method, before Java 8 we have to implement the write an implementing class of that interface, and then we have to override that abstract method and give the definition of abstract method. But Java 8 provides a leverage to not to write any implementing class. We can directly provide implement the abstract method by using a lambda expressions. How we will do this, we will see that when we are doing the hands-on on this particular topic. What are the basic characteristics of the lambda expressions? Lambda expressions having a basically four basic characteristics: optional type declaration, where we are defining an optional type. We are not defining what type of value we are passing in that particular method. And there is a optional parenthesis with the parameter. There is a optional curly braces also there, and then there is a optional return type keyword is also there. We all see all these four type of implementations when we are do the hands-on. Now let's jump into another topic. This is basically a method references. So method references is basically defined using a double colon symbol, and by using a method references we are directly calling the concrete method or a static method or a constructor with the class name. So suppose that we have a one method called display in a particular class called person. So we can just with the method reference we can just call a display method like name of the class and double colon then name of the method. That's it. So that way we can define the method. So all these things we will cover in a hands-on video. Then there is a one other thing they have introduced in Java 8, basically a default method. So before Java 8 we cannot provide give any concrete method in interfaces. In Java 8 basically they have defined adding a default method functionality, where we can suppose that in interfaces basically suppose we are defining 4 or 5 methods, and out of these 4 or 5 methods we know that one particular method is having a definition which is basically common for all the implementing classes. So in place of defining an abstract method of that method, we can define as default method, and that default method is basically used by all the implementing classes. And if any implementing class doesn't want to use the definition which is basically defined in that default method, they can just override that default method. So basically they are hiding the definition of interface, and they will use the definition whatever they will write in their own classes. So this feature is basically used to provide the backward compatibility. Basically when they are introducing a functional interface concept, there is a collection API where they are facing difficulties to provide a backward compatibility of the methods and their interfaces and all. So to overcome this issue, they have introduced a default method concept where they have defined all the definitions of the previous versions in a default method, so that the backward compatibility will be provided. By adding this backward compatibility, the old interfaces of previous Java versions can use a lambda expressions. So like simple default method, we can define a static default method also, which is basically on the class level. So in interfaces, basically they have in Java 8 provided a leverage of apart from defining an abstract method, so provided leverage to define the default method as well as static methods. Now the next feature they have introduced is that optional classes. In real-time programming, we have seen a lot of places where due to the either a programmer fault or either the value, whatever the value they are fetching for the that particular object fields are not getting. So due to that, there is a lot of places where they are getting a null pointer exception, which is basically looking a quite bad programming practice. So to overcome such issues, they provided an optional class, which is basically a container of object which is used to contain all the not null objects. Optional is basically introduced to avoid the null pointer exception, and it will basically wrap the object, and in case of object different to a null values, returns define the default value. That way the avoiding a null pointer exception. So that means that when we are wrapping any particular class object into an optional, that means that if their value will not be get, they will provide their default value. So either a default value would be the empty one, or either a default value would be the null. So the optional class having a method like empty, get, if present, or if present, off, and off nullable action. So these are the few important methods which we are using when we are using an optional classes. Then they have introduced one new datetime API called a LocalDateTime, and the basic concept of using this datetime API is basically in previous datetime APIs they are not thread safe. So when we are working in a multi-threaded environment, that is basically not a thread safe, and the date object would be immutable. So to make it immutable, they have introduced one new datetime API, which is basically local datetime, and that is thread safe, and we can use that local datetime API in multi-threaded environment, and their objects are immutable. So that means in a multi-threaded environment, if we define a local datetime object and declare the value for this, it will not be changed. Apart from that, they have introduced one more feature, basically Base64. Base64 is basically introduced to provide encryption and decryption of the object, and there is a encode and decode classes which is having an encode and decode methods. So those basically encoding the method, encoding the object with whatever object we are passing into that method, and in decode it is providing a decoded value of those objects. So these are the basic important features which is basically introduced in Java 8. Apart from that, we have already shown that there is a changes in the memory management in hash map internal working. They had changed one change introduced in place of linked list, they have used a free map. So those changes we will discuss in the later videos. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you.